Thank you for joining us. I mean, there's a fierce competition between side events, so it's fantastic to see your interest and that you've joined us for a conversation, a discussion, a side event organized by Tradewater and the Carbon Containment Lab. And we will be discussing the in and export of end-of-life refrigerants, the transboundary movements of refrigerants. A topic that becomes more and more central as we move towards implementation of Kigali. Also a very critical element, end-of-life refrigerants, when we think about operationalizing life cycle refrigerant management. And today we'll be discussing the ins and outs, the challenges and the opportunities that come with the transboundary movement of these refrigerants. We will start off with two presentations from Tradewater and the Carbon Containment Lab, from Gabe Plotkin and from Öztürk from the lab. After that, we have invited 5 panelists. 4 are here in the room, and the 5th panelist is with us remotely. I will introduce the panelists after we had the discussion and the presentations, and then we'll discuss together how we will proceed. We'll hope that with the panelists and their experiences around the transboundary movements of refrigerants, that we will also engage you, the audience, in a conversation, question and answers to go deeper into the topic. With that, I look at Gabe Plotkin, for the first presentation to give us an overview and set the landscape. Gabe, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mas. And thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see so many people interested in this topic, and I hope that we provide a forum for really initiating what we think needs to be a broader and more formal conversation. I also want to thank the Carbon Containment Lab for co-sponsoring this event with us. My name is Gabe Plotkin. I'm one of the founders of Tradewater. We are a global company that's focused on fighting climate change by permanently destroying refrigerants at end of life to ensure that they never reach the atmosphere. We help both governments and private stakeholders find end-of-life refrigerants, collect and aggregate them, ship them for safe and responsible destruction, and we finance all of this work ourselves. The end-of-life destruction of F-gases is essential. Studies out there show the volumes of these gases that have been produced so far or will be produced before the HFC phase down is complete is a huge and staggering number. MIT in the United States University thinks there's 11 billion tons of CO2 equivalent worth of CFCs still on the Earth. EIA has done a study I'm sure many of you are familiar with, 90 billion metric tons of CO2 equivalent worth of ODS and HFC that will have been produced and will be produced. That number is more than double the annual emissions of the entire planet. We must phase down production. We must reclaim and recycle, but eventually we need to destroy at the end of life the used and unwanted volumes, or we will erase decades of work to prevent catastrophic climate change. And we're very encouraged to see the work of Cuba, Chile, the Dominican Republic, and others in this contact group focusing on some of these stockpiles of unwanted and used refrigerants, seeking end-of-life solutions. This work of end-of-life solutions for this large volume of gases is not easy. Let's assume for a moment that we know where all of these gases are and that we have the ability to collect all of them. This is, of course, a big assumption. But where will we destroy them? The available destruction facilities currently in operation are few and far between. The Carbon Containment Lab, our colleagues are engaged in very important work to identify available destruction facilities. This work is ongoing, but the preliminary findings show that there are 153 countries with no known destruction facility. 14 more might, we're not sure. 13 that have operating destructions, but they don't allow imports, meaning they can only handle the gases within their borders. And approximately 15 known destruction facilities that can destroy ODS and HFCs and allow imports. That means these 90 billion tons of CO2 equivalent right now, if we could collect all of them, would have to go to 15 countries. And what that means, of course, is that there is a mismatch between where these gases are and where we need to destroy them. This is consistent with our experience at Tradewater. We work with governments and stakeholders, as I mentioned, to collect and identify these gases and to have them destroyed. What you see here are 4 photos of gases, refrigerants, CFCs in particular, that we have found around the globe in countries that do not have their own destruction facility. So we had to find destruction facilities that meet TEEP requirements and allow you to import these gases. And what we have found, first of all, is that we have contracts and we've been able to work with destruction facilities in 6 countries. Those are shown here. We do work again with all 6 of these facilities. But the United States, of course, is not a signatory to the Basel Convention. They don't allow the imports of this stuff as waste. Thailand and Indonesia, the same. So what that means for us, when we find these gases in the locations I showed you, we need to move them to Germany, France, or Switzerland in order to destroy them. The result, of course, is this. Huge movement, huge transport opportunities. It adds time and energy and effort. It adds cost to these projects, but also a significant logistical challenge. And that's what we're here to discuss. This is the Basel Convention for the Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Waste. In order to move from the source country to these destruction facilities, we must follow the Basel Convention. Now, very high overview for those of you not familiar with Basel, adopted in 1989 in response to the dumping of hazardous waste on certain countries, particularly by wealthy countries, into developing nations. The objective is to protect human health and the environment against the effects of these hazardous wastes to prevent this kind of dumping. And there's a few principal aims: to reduce hazardous waste generation, to make sure we manage this in a sound way, to restrict transboundary movements of waste except where it's perceived to be in accordance with principles of environmentally sound management, and to create a regulatory system applying to cases where transboundary movements are permitted. Now, just to be clear, in almost all places around the world, refrigerants destined for destruction are deemed hazardous waste. Not always, but almost always, and therefore subject to the Basel Convention. Before I talk quickly about what that means, I want to focus on that second bullet because there's an emphasis to restrict movement. Do not move it unless it's good for the environment and considered consistent with sound environmental management. We deal with a lot of countries who read that, who understand that, who say, we cannot do it. Basel says no. That's not always true. And we have worked with governments to explain it's not you cannot do it, it's that you cannot do it unless it is sound and environmentally responsible, and especially true if you cannot deal with it in your own source country. So we need to overcome this initial response of no and talk to Basel focal points to say, yes, we can in the right circumstances. It also requires then complying with bullet 3, this regulatory system. And this is where the challenge has lied. So what does the Basel Convention entail if you are able to move from source country to destruction country? Number one, you have to identify the waste and the relevant stakeholders. So what is the waste? How do you classify it? Who's the exporter? Who is the importer? Who is the shipper going to be? You then identify a licensed shipper, someone who can take it, who literally has a boat authorized to carry hazardous goods going from your country to the destruction country. For some, there's lots of options. For others, there's only a couple. And when you figure out the shipper, you then need to figure out every country that that ship is going to stop between source and destruction. Then you have to notify the authorities. This is called duly motivated requests. The exporter has to be notified, what country it's leaving, the importer, the country it's going to, and then every country that that ship is going to touch along the way needs to be notified and told that this material is coming. Then you have to get a financial guarantee. This means some kind of bond or financial commitment that says if something goes wrong or the exporter doesn't show up at the end of the day, there's money available to ensure that this waste doesn't get stuck or abandoned either along the route or at the importing country at the end of the route. No one wants, this is dumping. We're trying to prevent that. So the bond is required, and this varies depending on which country you're moving to, what is required of a financial guarantee. While you're working on that, you have to get prior informed consent. So not just asking and notifying the countries that you're leaving and going to and touching, but you need their consent along the way. This is called prior informed consent. Once you get everybody's written prior informed consent, a process, by the way, that differs in each country, then you have to make sure that you put this material on the right boat, that the boat travels the route it told you and doesn't get diverted to a different route, in which case you have to call a new country very quickly and tell them what's going on. You have to document all of the steps along the way. And at the very end, you have to confirm that the material made it to the country you're destined for and that was destroyed. You need a certificate of destruction to report back to all countries that have been involved along the way. It's understood process, but there are many, many steps, many, many different players involved, and it can take a lot of time. This is true for us. So these are timelines for 3 experiences that we have. First is moving from a country in Central America to Europe. There were only 2 countries in between the export and the import. So only 2 that we had to notify in the middle. It took 14 months to get the material from point A to point B. 9 of those months were spent before it even got on a boat, getting all of the permissions and the guarantees lined up that I talked about. In another experience, South America to Europe, it took 15 months before we could even put it on a boat, and 19 months total to get the material from South America to Europe. And finally, in a project from the Middle East to Europe, it took 20 months when we first started this process until it got to the destination country. 17 of those months were spent working on the Basel process, trying to get the consent of all the parties along the way. This is a challenge, of course, but it's also an environmental problem. While we are waiting for this permission to move these gases, they are often contained in cylinders that are not destined for long-term storage. So they will leak. We lost almost 1,703 tons of CO2 equivalent from leaks in that Transport A process. In that 14 months it took to move it, we lost a lot of gas out of these old cylinders before we could get it to the destination country.
What proportion?
It was about 2 or 3%, I think. In Transit A, they were remaining in disposable cylinders because we had to consolidate at destruction. In B and C, they were in B as well, disposable cylinders. In C, in an ISO tank. Obviously, if you can consolidate into an ISO tank that's more secure while you wait, this leads to other problems, though, about resources available in source countries. In some places, it's easier to consolidate. In others, it's much more challenging.
chemicals,
Yes.
but they were packed in the UN approved cylinders and there was no problem at all.
Yes. All the cylinders, just to be clear, you cannot move in cylinders that are not permitted for transport. There are rules and regulations on this, a very important point. But original cylinder packaging that they were produced in is considered okay for some movements. And those we know are okay for movement, but not for long-term storage. So why did it take us so long? What are some of the challenges to get through those steps? A few things I'll highlight. First of all, it's not always easy to find the right basal focal point in a particular country. There isn't a good dedicated resource that's up to date. Sometimes it's a personal contact information and that person retires or moves to another department and you send the email to the wrong person and you don't even know it. It's also true that within Basel, they set a framework in place, but each country has laws and rules that does it their own way. And you have to understand each law for every country you're dealing with, which includes how do you communicate with the basal focal point? Some say email is okay. Some say we have a portal. You have to use our portal. Some say we only want hard copy documents with wet signatures. And of course, if one country wants wet signatures on a hard copy and another has a portal, it becomes difficult for them all to approve the same way. Who sends the DMRs? In some cases, it's the exporter. In some cases, it's the exporting country and the basal. But in the receiving end, sometimes the receiving country, the importing country, wants to hear from the exporter, or they want to hear from the exporting government. And there's often, again, a mismatch. This can lead to delays. Who goes first? Does the importing country need to say it's okay to bring it? And then the export country says, okay, we'll send it. Sometimes the exporting country says, we don't want to bother with this unless we know someone will receive it. Sometimes the importing country says, we don't even want to think about this unless we know the exporting country will say it's okay. And there's back and forth again, because the framework is there. Everyone has to say yes, but each country does it differently. There's also a problem that there's no enforcement mechanism if nobody responds. So you cannot put it on a boat unless everybody says this is okay. But if somebody doesn't answer, they're too busy, maybe they're out on leave, maybe you've done something wrong and you don't know, it sits and it waits and it waits. And it's not always easy to find that person and force them to act. Even well-intentioned people, you all know, you work in governments, you have busy, hard jobs and not always able to get all to these things. And that can really slow down the process. So just in terms of some good news, the good news I would say is one, it is possible to do this. It can be done. It takes time, it takes effort, but it can happen. The other thing is to say that the two treaties do not conflict. Basel doesn't prevent the movement of these refrigerants. It just defines the process that you have to use to move those refrigerants. Education and experience makes it smoother and faster. Once you know the right people, once you know how each country operates, it gets faster and it gets easier. What took 20 months the first time took 4 months the second time. That's great for people doing it multiple times. But how do we make it easier for people doing it the first time or who only need to do it once? This is what we're here today to talk about. And the last thing I'll say is it's all about the people. The Basel Convention is a thing. It's got a framework, but there's people, including people in this room, who wear the Basel focal point hat, and you are the people who can help make this happen. And so what I would say is our goals for today, this is part of a series of conversations we've been having with the Carbon Containment Lab. We started at the Basel COP in Geneva in May. We talked at the Montreal Protocol OEWG, regional workshops, and then here today, we're sharing information. We're beginning what we believe to be an important dialogue. How do we do this well? How do we prevent these end-of-life gases from getting stuck? We want to inspire stakeholders such as yourself to establish resources to help each other. And we hope at the end to inspire the Basel community and the Montreal Protocol community to set up a more formal dialogue where these two communities are actually working together to ensure the smooth and effective and environmentally sound movement of these gases around the world. That is setting the stage. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Osner to briefly talk about some of the things that we learned at OEWG in an earlier conversation, and then we will open it up to the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Hi, everyone. My name is Özgür Öztürk, and I'm part of the Carbon Containment Lab. I would like to tell you a bit about the lab. We are a small nonprofit located in the United States. We apply our expertise in scientific research, entrepreneurship, and investment in high integrity climate solutions. And some of these solutions are super pollutants. Specifically, we work on HFCs and methane. In terms of HFCs and cooling, we work to improve life cycle refrigerant management. We also encourage looking more into alternative cooling technologies so that once we phase out of the existing gases, we can have more sustainable ways to cool down our homes, our countries. Overall, we have a holistic and partnership approach in how we do things, and we often come to these places like Montreal Protocol meetings to work with partners and connect with the community. Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to explain what we have been doing in terms of our research and our work on transboundary movements and how it relates to our overall research and work at the lab. As I said, we work on life cycle refrigerant management, and one of the important parts of this life cycle is end of destruction, the way we see it. So we have been interested in this work and in this problem of how you move gases when you have to move gases. The problem Gabe explains, and this work took different shapes and forms since last year, and our overall goals and activities are around informing and raising awareness, both in Montreal community channels and communities, as well as Basel Convention and related parts. We have been also doing some legal and data analysis. I'd like to share some of those later when we get the chance. We have been also doing surveys and gathering data using different channels. And our activities so far took shapes of some events in both Basel Convention and Montreal Protocol events and possibilities. The first time we had this opening and share the problem and discuss this topic was at Basel Convention meetings in Geneva last May. And then we went to OEWG Bangkok to discuss more. And this time we were able to engage with ozone officers to get their points and ask them questions. And I will share some of these findings we got out of the working group. And finally, now we started to do some regional workshops to look into the problem more in detail and look at the regional specificities. And the first one we had was in Senegal, and this month, I believe November 19, we are going to have another regional workshop in Bangkok. So if you are around, if you're going to attend, we would love to have you there. I would like to talk some of the findings we found out of this open-ended working group in Bangkok. During that meeting, we were able to have a fun Kahoot game with the ozone officers. I'm curious if anyone in this room attended that game, but we heard great things. It was a great way to engage with ozone officers and get your opinion. So in that Kahoot game, in that in-person survey, we were able to collect responses from 65 ozone officers, and these responses tell us something about the transboundary movement and how Basel and Montreal Protocol works. So one of the questions we asked was if ozone officers know about transboundary movements and hazardous waste export under Basel Convention. We learned that there is some learning can be done with the ozone officers because not everyone knows how Basel works. Very understandable, but this is a great opportunity to share some knowledge. We also learned in another question that ozone officers think their Basel focal point colleagues would be interested to learn more about ozone depleting substances, life cycle refrigerant management, and overall in refrigerants. Yeah, we learned that more than half of the Basel focal points would be interested. This is also a great insight because in another question, we learned that most of these ozone officers and Basel focal points, they are part of the same ministry or same government agency. This is great news because these officers can share knowledge, experience, and information. But of course, it's not without the challenge, because we know that you ozone officers, as well as the Basel focal points, are wearing multiple hats and you're dealing with multiple topics. So you are not always in touch with your Basel focal points, but still this was a great way to see there is interest and there are ways, but some work needs to be done to make this connection between people working on Basel Convention and Montreal Protocol connect and talk more. This is what we learned and what we have done so far, but we continue to work on this problem. As you are seeing, we are here. We are going to be in Bangkok as the Carbon Containment Lab partners with the Tradewater. So we are aiming to facilitate more communication and alignment between Montreal Protocol and Basel Convention, representatives at the secretariat level, as well as the officers. The way we are seeing this to make through workshops and bring people from the other side together. We are also turning this research into a global destruction capacity data. As Gabe explained, not every country has destruction facilities, and the reality is far from that. There are a handful of countries that has the facilities and can allow or allows imports from other countries. So we are working on this. In fact, we are going to show our data tomorrow lunchtime in another event. And the small map you are seeing is just a small introduction to that. But we are turning that into a publication because we want this information to be available so that decision makers, policymakers can use this information on the destruction availability to turn into action. So thank you very much. And I would be looking forward to receiving your questions.
Thank you, Oznur. I suggest that after Gabe's and your presentation, we'll hold off with the questions for now. We'll start engaging with the panelists and explore this further, and then we'll open up the room for questions, including responses and feedback on Gabe's and Oznur's presentations, if that's okay with you. Thank you very much for that. Before we start the conversation with all of you, we have invited 5 guests to share with us some of their experiences with the in and export of refrigerants from their perspectives. We're privileged to have 3 representations of the National Ozone Units with us, Malau from Kenya, Gilda from Paraguay, and Margaret from South Africa. So we're looking forward to hearing your experiences. We have Tatiana Terukova, probably the most knowledgeable about all of this among us, formerly working for the Basel Secretariat, and today working for and representing Ozone Action Network. And remotely, we have Bas Tika. Bas, are you there? Just to see if you can hear us. Excellent. Welcome. Calling in from, is it Germany, Bas, that you're calling in from?
Yes, it's Germany. I'm in the north of Germany at the moment.
Excellent, thanks. We'll turn to you in a minute. From Ramonda's, a destruction facility, private sector, a partner here with us remotely. So let's start with the first few questions to our panelists. I advise you to keep it short. We'll have ample opportunity to go to much more detail later on in the second round, but just for the audience to get a little feel of where you come from, share with us what's your relationship or your experience you have with the transboundary movements of refrigerants, your background in that, and if you can add quickly what you feel from your experience and from the work you're doing in this field, what you think is the biggest challenge when we deal with the transboundary movement of end-of-life refrigerants. Margaret, may I start with you? Just a brief sharing with us your experience with the in and export of transboundary movements of refrigerants, and briefly, and then can you share with us what you, from your perspective in the Ministry of Environment, feel is the biggest challenge of doing this smoothly?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Within South Africa, we are in the same ministry, and also same office where we are applying both the Montreal Protocol and the Basel. We call them both chemical and waste management. Therefore, when coming to the refrigerants, there is a straightforward procedure that whenever there is an importation of the refrigerants, it goes through the quota allocation, and that is communicated through the importer and the area where the exporter where is importing that. And there is a permit that is obtained where the importer will be able to receive their consignment. When coming to the Basel Convention, we also have under the waste management, we do have a prior informed consent where it's falling within the import and export of all hazardous waste. And there is a communication with the focal points of the two countries that might be requesting to import that particular hazardous waste. And when that communication is being done, then the permit is being issued where the consignment can be shipped out. Therefore, in those areas, we don't have much of the challenge. We have already facilitated a number of the consignments that are related to the halons, that also they were going for the reclamation coming from our side to another countries, as well as also some of the exports that were coming from other countries to our sites. Therefore, the procedure is clear, especially when you are following the prior informed consent and you are a focal point for the focal point for the Basel Convention. Most of the time, especially with the African team, because we know one another, if maybe there's a consignment that is coming to South Africa and we are notified from the focal point of the Montreal Protocol that this is the refrigerants that need to come to South Africa, we are able to direct you to our colleagues or even to follow up what are the developments relating to the consignment that is supposed to be given the permit, and also where is it within that tracking of all that consignment. Therefore, that is the procedure that we are able to address within ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And it's good to emphasize that there is a destruction facility in South Africa. So that means that from your perspective, there's imports from other countries that don't have that capacity, and that's important to understand. And it's heartening to hear, and it's good to hear that there's a close relationship between the Basel people and the Montreal Protocol people in your department. We'll get back to some of the details later. Thanks, Margaret. Gilda, you have a translator next to you. So we do it in Spanish and in English or any other language we can vent them. As a first round, your experience you have personally with the Basel process, with the in and export of refrigerants, and perhaps if you have some time after that to share with us one of the biggest challenges that you've experienced in practice.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to stay here and to share our experience of Basel Convention about the poisons or the end of the life of the poisons and the PCBs. But in refrigerants, we don't have yet the experience. And for us was very was very difficult because we are in inland or landlocked country, and we have to have the permissions of the other countries, and the good is we have in the Ministry of the Environment the focal point of Basel Convention and the focal points of the Montreal Protocol. And at first, we will start with the inventory, and we must know what we have, what kind of gases we have. And this is my challenge now.
Excellent. And as with Margot, we're going to go somewhat deeper in your experience in a second round. Now, your interaction with the in and export of refrigerants, and share with us in this first round what you feel from your perspective as a major challenge in the transboundary movements of these end-of-life refrigerants.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting Kenya to this discussion. It's very important discussion and timely when we're discussing about end life of refrigerants is a big issue. Also, we taking note that we just did an inventory recently on ODSs, which means that in 2025, with the support and partnership with GIZ, which means that we now know the quantities roughly that we have in the country. And we now doing sort of the last allowance of HFCs into the country, the last quarter, which means then we have a rough idea. Then the question is, for the inventory that we have into the country, what happens to them? And that's why this discussion is very important. So I tell you that when I joined the ministry, and not long ago in 2020, the first assignment that was given was actually to report on the BRS. And the Basel Convention, the last time was reported was 2008. So I had an assignment of trying to look at what then happened between 2008 and 2020, trying to fill in the tables and so on. And the work is not easy, especially for that, but I have to agree that it is a very good learning experience also to get to know what is being transported, what is coming in, what is going out, what is it being in transit. So then the issue that raised, and especially related to ozone, at that time, I did not even know that there was a Montreal Protocol. I was in the same ministry, though. Later on, I learned that there was a Montreal Protocol and there's a transboundary movement at that level. But just to cut the long story short, now I also work on the Montreal Protocol and still work on the Basel Convention on the reporting issue, which now is easy for me to correlate both on the Montreal Protocol and as well as the Basel Convention. Then something that has happened recently in Kenya, which is very important for us to take note of, is that we have just ratified the Kigali Amendment in 2023, and then there are regulations which are coming into place, which now, and then there was also a waste management regulations, which allows the prior informed consents of the hazardous waste. And the good thing is that the Environmental Management Act also defined what is hazardous waste, what is waste. So when we developing the ozone ODS regulations, it was easy to merge the two regulations to speak to each other. So that's something positive that under the controlled substance regulations of 2025, we allow export of controlled substances, and there is a schedule on that, on what is allowed, and also transit. But importation is totally prohibited because we depend on South Africa for destruction, which means our ozone depleting substances has to be moved to South Africa, or pre-shipped to South Africa for that. And I'm happy that my sister mentioned that we can have even bilaterals to see how that can be fast-tracked. Currently, and we don't have an experience of moving yet, but we have an experience of collection. We do now collection, and we have a collection center, and the process of transporting them to South Africa has actually started. So no experience yet of transporting, but at least we have the right regulation, the right laws to do this. Just to mention one more, the extended producer responsibility that Kenya has developed, and the extended producer responsibility has also managed to come up with the initial discussion on EPROs, extended producer responsibility organizations, which now are looking also on their controlled substance, both I mean the whole of it, not only under not only the gases but also the whole issue. So that is a good also step which is going to help us now also manage this issue, so that as we're transporting the substances, then the issue of e-waste also has to be addressed. So I think one of the challenge, and thank you that my colleague, our colleague from Basel is here. I don't know how, maybe because I say I fill those tables for Basel Convention. Could it be somewhere that mention the kind of control or the kind of transboundary movement that we are doing? Could it also mention the ozone depleting substances somewhere, or so that it is actually something that we'll call or will make sure that the person filling in the Basel Convention form will also consult the Montreal Protocol person? Maybe just something to maybe think in the future. And I know that maybe this is for the Conference of Parties to deal with, but let me just put it out there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Malau, for that, especially that last suggestion. Let's keep that in mind when we turn the discussion into solutions and next steps and practical solutions for these problems. That's a good point. Tatjana, Bas, I'll come to you in a minute, but I'll first turn to Tatjana. Your first round, Tatjana. I know you know so much about it. You could explain everything to us, but your personal experience with the Basel process is pretty obvious from a secretariat point of view. But share a little bit with us the relationship that you've seen between the Montreal Protocol and Basel, and share with us, like I've asked the other panelists, one or two challenges that you see that we can address and make progress on this.
Thank you very much, Mas. And well, perhaps I would like to start with the fact that I did spend 14 years in the Secretariat, the BRS Secretariat, but here I officially represent Ozone Action. And this is a disclaimer, so I do not represent the BRS Secretariat. So for any legal advice, please contact them directly. I think it's important because, the transboundary movements obviously understand that the rules have a very important implications, right? So I think over the years, maybe Basel Convention has a little bit of bad rap with the Montreal community. And I hope with through this type of events, we can clarify a few issues. But going back to your question about the relationship between let's say, two treaties, I would like to mention a couple of things. The first thing is that for this year, Conference of Parties, the Secretariat prepared, BRS Secretariat, together with Montreal Ozone Secretariat, prepared a report on the interlinkages between the Montreal Protocol and BRS conventions. And of course, in that report, you really cover everything. So what we're discussing today is very, very specific. So, but then here you also link Montreal Protocol to the Stockholm Convention. You also have the issue of destruction of POPs, and I think this is something maybe interesting also to see the parallel. But anyway, so you have that report available. Now, following that submission or publication of this report, Ozone Secretariat, Ozone Action, and DERA Secretariat, we actually thought that we need to maybe dive a little bit deeper, specifically on the issue of the implication of the Basel Convention on the Montreal Protocol trade. And together we are preparing a note, information note, where actually we explain all these legalities of the Basel Convention and how it impact Montreal Protocol trade. So we're hoping that that note, it's a short note, would be available for the MOP, but it's still in the final stage. So I hope that will inform the parties to the Montreal Protocol. Now, in terms of the other linkages, perhaps it would be good to mention that there was a decision by the Basel Convention COP in '95. So that decision was about transboundary movements and the fact that if the substances are purified to the ISO standard, it will be moved as a product and not as waste. So that was very, very old decision, and I'm not actually sure that parties remember that decision, but it exists. So that's on the linkages. Now, on the challenges, I think what you have been mentioning about the PIC procedure. So, well, of course, so that was also discussed a lot in the Basel Convention community. And in fact, there was a process established between parties to discuss the challenges related to PIC and what could be the actions taken to address these challenges. So, and there are a lot of things were kind of all the challenges were broken down into the various issues. For example, you mentioned the challenge related to the how to find the contact points, and sometimes there is no response and so on. So there is a correspondent, let's say, action or recommendation have been proposed. So there is already a list of recommendations which have been approved by this year conference of the parties, which took place in April. And this group will continue working on the further, let's say, challenges and recommendations. But here, yeah, perhaps I would like to mention a couple of things that, for example, regarding the fact that there is no responses, right? And I think you mentioned that is one of the challenge. And I think
we'll go into the more detailed discussions later. Tatjana.
Okay, then maybe I will
exactly.
I will stop here and then we can follow up.
Yeah, I didn't want to stop you, but to indicate that for the particular problems and specific issues that Gabe also raised, we'll have ample opportunity to unpack that. So shall we?
Well, perhaps I will mention one point. I think also what you mentioned is that there is no, I think you call it enforcement of the PIC procedure. I would say, but I would say there is in the PIC procedure, there is no the so-called timelines agreed by the convention, except when it comes to transit. In transit, it's 60 days. And so that discussion, that topic, meaning that if you send the notification, you don't have a timeline by which the transit country or country of import has to respond. So that was discussed also quite a lot in this negotiation group. And one of the, let's say, recommendation was to really consider whether on the national level countries actually are looking to that, because a party can decide for that in the national legislation that they have to respond to notification, for example, in 2 weeks. So that things can be clarified to the national level in the national legislation. But it's true that in the Basel Convention, you don't have these so-called timelines by when, and this is, I think, maybe talks to what you mentioned as a challenge. But I think also we have to keep in mind the overall spirit of the Basel Convention, that it's really to protect developing countries, meaning that if developing country does not respond, the shipment cannot go on, right? So in a way, the country will be protected from unwanted shipments. So this is, I think, the philosophy as well. So really develop protection developing countries from unwanted waste. So perhaps I will stop here and we'll come back.
Thank you. Well, part of the challenge will be in our conversation, but also further down the road, is to make sure that the Montreal Protocol community is aware of the processes that go on under Basel. If Basel is talking about improving certain procedures, making them more efficient, that would be very valuable information to also be digested and understood by the Montreal Protocol community, especially at the national level. So there is the challenge to make a link between the developments under Basel, including improvements of procedures, and how this is then understood and used from the perspective of the Montreal Protocol community and the national ozone units. Bas, from Nairobi, we turn to Germany. You look at this from the perspective of the destruction facility, from the perspective of the private sector. We'll go much deeper into your reality in the second round, but in this first round, Bas, tell us a little bit about how you look from your perspective at the in and export of end-of-life refrigerants, and what you see as a big challenge from your perspective when it comes to the smooth transboundary movement of these end-of-life refrigerants for destruction. We can go into more detail in the second round, but just some of the more general observations from your side as the private sector. Bas, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, to be honest, I think looking at from the point of the destruction facility in this case, the challenges we face with the whole Basel procedure are actually basically the same as Gabe already mentioned in his presentation. We hit the same problems when we do an application, like timeframes that take for ages, very difficult to find the right people to contact, and that is not necessarily finding the right people in the export country or the import country. One of the biggest challenges are the transit countries. Which countries and whom to reach there? That's a big challenge from my point of view. The import and export countries are usually not the biggest problem. So I think that is a challenge, and if there would be a solution for that, like there once was a list with all contacts for all OECD countries. The last time I saw that it was not really up to date anymore, but a system like that would be great, and to make that smoother. Another problem that you might end up with is the connection of local laws with international laws, or European laws with Basel connection, because we're not on. I'm in Europe, in Germany, so I also have to comply to the European regulations. And in this case, for the import of ODS gases, of F-gases, make sure that the destruction facility actually has an EU license to accept that material. That's a challenge that sometimes is overlooked.
Excellent, Bas. Thanks for that insight. In the next round, when I come to you, I'd like to hear 2 or 3 solutions that if you could, write the procedure, or if you could make recommendations on how to make these transboundary movements smoother, what your 2 or 3 solutions would be. What would be your 2 or 3 suggestions to improve that transboundary movements? I'll come back to you, Bas, in a second round. Yes. Thanks for that. Before we start opening up the floor for questions and suggestions from the audience, let's turn to our panelists again. Gilda, let's go a little bit into the detail of your experience. Paraguay, as I understood, has a specific law that regulates transboundary movements or exports. Explain to us a little bit what the benefits of that particular specific law is, and what you would recommend to other countries to make any transboundary movement more efficient.
Lo que nosotros tenemos como Paraguay es la ley del Convenio de Basilea, que nosotros fijamos como ley este convenio. No, por supuesto que tenemos también otra ley en la que no aceptamos los residuos tóxicos y peligrosos, pero sí hacemos digamos, la exportación a través del convenio Basilea. Lo que sí yo recomiendo, ¿verdad?, a los países es que nos hagamos una especie de formulario o de lo que tenemos que hacer, porque esta documentación que tenemos que cumplir es muy engorrosa o muy larga, ¿verdad?
Let's try to translate
Okay.
so that we can.
Perfect.
Sorry.
So in Paraguay, what they have done is bring the Basel law, international law, into local legislation. They accept exports, so they are allowed to export, but they don't receive hazardous waste. So import is not allowed into Paraguay. And then that's the situation in her country. And then when she went into recommendations, what she said is that there are a lot of requirements from Basel, so it would be helpful to have a sort of form or summary of what countries need to do. So try to bring this complex and long law into straightforward steps or guidelines that every country needs to follow.
Y no olvidar las garantías que tenemos para, digamos que garantías y responsabilidades principalmente. Es lo que tenemos que, digamos que fijarnos y tener en cuenta. Y ponernos de acuerdo las diferentes autoridades, tanto las aduanas como también porque cada institución es dueña de su residuo. En unos casos nosotros tuvimos problemas con los residuos provenientes de la agricultura, que son los venenos, y en otros casos el ascarel o el PCB de la parte de energía eléctrica. Entonces, esas autoridades tienen que ponerse de acuerdo también con el punto focal de Basilea para definir qué documentación es la que tenemos que presentar. Pero, okay.
Again,
Sorry.
I will forget. So first, she touched upon the importance of the guarantees and responsibilities for that to be clear. And then what she suggests that is really important for this to work is for the different agencies or organisms to come together and to agree on the different steps and documents that need to be provided. For example, she mentioned customs as being one of the key players in the process usually. And then she went into specific examples in Paraguay where they dealt with agriculture waste or with PCB, which comes from electric energy. So that's where the different other stakeholders might come into play and interconnect. And that's why it's important for all of the different agencies to have a good communication and to work together to make this work with the different players that have a say in the process, depending on the waste, or the type of waste that needs to be moved.
Y lo que yo recomiendo es fortalecer la cooperación institucional y contar con guías regionales que facilitaría mucho el proceso.
So yeah, as she mentions before, Paraguay is landlocked, so she suggests to have also regional agreements or cooperation between countries that are close, neighboring countries. and to foster this type of collaborations.
Excellent. No, and particularly your suggestion, that's something we should list on our to-do list, is to have an accessible, straightforward explanation of which steps you have to take to do it properly. And not just as the Basel focal point, because they're probably very knowledgeable, but also from the perspective of the Montreal Protocol as a national ozone unit. What should I be doing? A, B, C, D to make this, work and compliant. Which brings me to your point, Malau, that you made earlier. You suggested also changing the form a little bit, or to allow indicating that this particular shipment is relating to refrigerants and the Montreal Protocol, prompting anyone who's working with that form on the Basel site, a Basel focal point, prompting to say, hey, let's get in touch with my ozone colleague because this is a refrigerant. Is that something you think is a useful step forward to do something about the forms? It sounds very bureaucratic, but it could help to more clearly indicate what we're dealing with and to make it alert to those who are working on refrigerants what this transboundary movements is all about.
Thank you very much, and and I agree with my colleague here on the guidelines and or something like SOPs or just sort of best environment practices on that, and I think this will also be in relation to your question that and what I've suggested earlier on. I'm just giving myself taking back when I was reporting on the Basel Convention. If perhaps, because one of the things that you do when you are asked to report on something is to look at the questions and see who do I bring on board to give certain data or certain information. And at that time, that when we are constituting that team, we did not include the Montreal Protocol team, simply because we felt that at that time, then therefore, they might not provide information which will be relevant in filling our data or questionnaire. But now coming to that other end of the Montreal Protocol, and we have had discussion on the Basel Convention and the Montreal Protocol, then I feel that there's a lot of data being generated from even from just Kigali implementation plans, from ODS banks, and some of them even from the movement now to the countries which have ability to destroy, like South Africa in Africa, and the ones that have been mentioned, I think 15 were mentioned, that can allow imports. I think that we just need to be to make that data known. Possibly that will be in the Basel Convention, that this is actually the number of tons that we have moved, and it is actually this kind of gas, so that is not, I don't recall well whether it is actually indicate for you to say exactly which hazardous waste you are moving, but could we make it in a way that it now requires something for the Montreal Protocol focal point to also be alert and action? Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Bas, I turn to you. Thinking about, from your perspective, if you had to make 3 suggestions on how to improve the process, can you share some of your considerations with us on what you think could help make this more efficient?
Well, one of the things that is the major challenge and the major cause of problems is the set time frame. So I think a suggestion would be, like in the European regulation, put set timeframes. Like when I apply for a transboundary waste shipment, the receiving authority has so many days to respond. I know that with the export and import countries is somewhat difficult, and even here in Europe, the time frame is set. They have to respond within 3 days after receiving the letter, and then within 30 days they have to give their okay or not. That usually doesn't work, but that's still acceptable because, as I said, those authorities you usually have a good connection to. But in Europe, it is also that all the transit countries have 30 days to respond, and after 30 days, it's an automatic consent. If a similar time frame could be set in the Basel, that would be great, because then that would take a lot of waiting for transit countries where a ship might pass by that just only touches international waters there, can cause a lot of delay in the whole process, where they actually have nothing to do with it. So that would be one suggestion from my side. Second suggestion, as I already mentioned, a up-to-date list of contacts in the different Basel countries where to actually send your applications, your paperwork to, so things go smoother and you're not hanging in from I sent it to person X and he's not working there anymore, so the mail the whole application never arrived. That's one suggestion. And as a last suggestion, I would always advise trying to find a local specialist, a disposal company, gas specialist, who actually has knowledge about this whole procedure, and contact your disposal facility that you have in mind and work to the solution together. Because the disposal company, I can speak for the company I work for here in Germany, we have experience with imports from a lot of countries worldwide. So we usually have an idea how to get things going. And companies like, for example, Tradewater, or they have that knowledge. So try to find in the country of origin a company that is active there, that has that knowledge, that might speed up things as well.
Wonderful, Bas. Thank you. Those are very practical solutions. Thanks for that. Tatjana, turning to you. We heard the suggestion from Gilda on a standard operating procedure or a list, not necessarily for the Basel people, who of course are experts in this, but something for the Montreal Protocol officers at the national level to understand what steps they have to take when it comes to refrigerants. Can you share with us what's your experience and what is a good resource? What is a good source of information currently that Montreal Protocol officers can access and can use to understand better what's involved with that transboundary movement of refrigerants end of life?
Well, actually, I think it's a very good question, because under the convention there are very, very numerous resources available. They're developed by the secretary, but also by the implementation, by the compliance committee, which look at the specific aspect of the implementation. So, for example, there is a guide to the control system. It's a document available in 6 languages, and it really explains the whole process. It explains how to complete the notification form movement document, which are the documents which they're attached to the peak procedure. So I think it's good for the importers, exporters to be aware of this resource. There is also guidance on the transit. Transit is a huge issue, of course, a lot of implications there. There is a guidance document on the illegal traffic. There are also important web-based tools, I would say. So one is the restrictions and what do we call it, import-export restrictions. So, and there you actually have you can type the country, and then you'll have, for example, if there are some restrictions on the national legislation in addition to the Basel threshold, you will find it there. For example, if the country decides not only to, to ban certain types of waste, you'll find it there. So it's linked to the national legislation. You will see there the list of disposal facilities. Of course, it depends what countries report to the Secretariat. So this is just one place which presents all the information, but you have a lot of information per country, what is the reports in this tool. Also, you have an import-export control tool, and there you have you can, for example, play around like country of export, country of import, transit, and then you can put the countries, and then you see if there are some restrictions. So this type of materials are there, and I think they're available to everyone. So I think it's just a matter of consulting the resources.
Thanks. Yeah, and I would assume that if those resources are out there, that the Basel focal point is very well aware that these tools are out there. So an interaction between the Basel focal point and his or her ozone colleague sharing that information would be a first step, I would assume. Yes. Bas, I'll turn to you in a bit with a technical question, which just came up, but and I hope you can answer it when I come to you later. We have been talking about ODS and HFCs. My technical question is now that we are moving towards, moving towards implementation of Kigali, whether technically, as a destruction facility, you need to re-equip or you need different technologies to destruct HFCs as opposed to ozone depleting substances. Because the more we implement Kigali, the more HFCs become destined for destruction. And we have to think about the technical capabilities of destruction facilities to digest those HFCs. So with that technical question, I'll come to you a bit later, Bas. For now, one final question to the panelists, and then we open it up to the floor. Gabe, in his presentation, made a mention of we're all people, it's people's work. There's procedures and there's forms, but it comes down at the end to people talking and working together. I'm interested because Margaret and Malawi, you've worked together with an actual, transboundary movement going from Kenya to South Africa. Explain a little bit about how, on a personal level, it has helped to sit down, know each other, to make all the procedural dimension of the work more efficiently. So how do you expand on such a professional personal relationship between two countries? What do you do? Do you meet each other and discuss it in the Montreal Protocol meetings? Is this a regional discussion that you have? How do you establish these types of relationships between two civil servants, if you wish, two different authorities? If I can start with you, I'm allowed to just share a little bit of how that works. As you raised the point of that now that you know each other, the process is much smoother.
Thank you very much. And I have to mention that we haven't, at least for the ozone depleting substance, we haven't yet transferred to South Africa. It is in the process, and we are doing this with the support of EGAS. Collection of this ODS is really a big challenge to collect and bring them together for shipment. But that process is now starting. But after we have at least enough for them to be called that we are exporting, you cannot say you're exporting smaller quantities. It has to be a considerable amount. But mentioning that knowing that a colleague from South Africa is dealing with the Basel Convention as well as the Montreal Protocol is a first step, because now, it becomes easier when it's now that time of shipment taking place, and bringing this focal point together. And I did mention, I don't know, in another meeting, that we had actually had a resolution under the AMSEN environmental ministers of environment, AMSEN, I'm forgetting even the Africa Ministerial Conference for Environment, which happened just recently. We had a resolution, a small resolution, because it was a challenge getting these focal points to talk together. And we did pass a resolution so that from the Africa Union point of view, will that discussion also be held? And we are actually looking on how this can happen even in the United Nations Environmental Assembly, which will take place here in Nairobi. How can this focal point be talking and knowing each other so that when there is a challenge, perhaps it becomes easier? It's a person you know, you can just perhaps call them or text them to fast track the process. So yes, I agree with you that relation and knowing each other will do that. But we haven't yet done that. But it is a good step forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And interesting to hear about the resolution, because that's it sounds so simple, but it's crucial that it becomes something as a priority on the radar, that you actually start communicating with each other. Margaret, from your perspective, South Africa, I anticipate that more and more imports of end-of-life refrigerants will be coming into South Africa. So these personal relationships, how important are they for the overall process in managing transboundary imports in your case?
That will quite a lot of end-of-life refrigerants coming to our place. The relationship has been built through time. We had to facilitate the disposal even of asbestos that was coming from the countries, and also the disposal of the PCBs that we have worked now with the UNEP and the UNDP. We have worked also with the GIZ on certain of the refrigerants that have been transported from our neighboring countries coming to South Africa. And ourselves, we do have the companies that are working together, as he has already mentioned that he has been working with the A-gas. Therefore, from South Africa's perspective, we already have that relationship that throughout the ODS banks that are already now being formed, we are aware that some of the gases might be the mixed gases. And there are already certain of the stockpiles that might be within some of the countries. Therefore, with the mixed gases, we are looking at two situations that we need to expand the reclamation facility, or to address the capacity of the reclamation facility, that we can distill some of the gases, and from being distilled that they can be repatented to the refrigerants that can be used. And we are also cognizant of the fact that we are still on the last stage of the servicing sector, where they are still requiring the R22. And as such, we are aware that the disposal of the reclamation of the R22, it cannot be addressed from the EU perspective based on the law. And therefore, South Africa could be the only country within the Africa continent that can assist, especially when coming to the reclamation of the R22 that can be recovered and be reused for the country to be able to allow to utilize that for their servicing sector. And mostly because now the quota allocation, also they are diminishing from quite a number of the countries. Then also relating to Africa, South Africa also has now entered into ratifying now the Bamako Convention, that is also be allowing even some of the African states to be able also to do business with South Africa on this. And also with the free trade that also is within our borders, that our AU has already alluded to, that we need to also allow the free trade. Therefore, only what could be addressed is that we can also address this regional agreements and the collaboration through all the conventions that we have, the free trades that our ministers have already also signed for. The only challenge that we have that we cannot immediately assist our neighboring countries that we do have the we policy, but from the we policy, the matter of EPR, yes, is there for the electronic and electrical, especially the washing machine and the fridges. But we didn't go deeper into the fridges to allow that there is a dismantling part that is addressing the circular economy, and there is a refrigerant part that needed to be extracted from those refrigerants. Therefore, we are still also addressing that part of the policy part and reviewing it. And when it is done, then it's only that maybe when there is a push for addressing the equipments that are containing refrigerants that we can address. In the meantime, the only ones that we can address, it is the refrigerants. Then from the refrigerants, we can inform you that we have already now destructed the R11, the R12, and also certain of the halons, and also some of the R22 that were highly contaminated. And therefore, there is an experience and a capacity already to address these refrigerants that need to be destructed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be turning to all of you in a moment. I'm interested to hear your perspective, mostly, of course, I assume, from the Montreal Protocol community, thinking about this issue, being confronted with this. What would help you in your positions to better understand and to more efficiently progress with a transboundary movement? So that would be a question that I have for all of us, is what would help you in a shorter term to make these transboundary movements smoother and more efficient, and to, in that sense, support the further implementation of Kigali. Before turning to you for brilliant answers, Buzz, Margaret already mentioned some of the blends, the mixes, but my technical question to you earlier was, does it make a difference from your perspective in the facility, the destruction facility, when more HFCs are coming in for destruction compared to what originally was more ODS? Does that require additional technological developments in the plant?
In our case, not necessarily, since our plant is very specifically for HFCs and CFCs. The technique we're using here is direct injection incineration. We incinerate the gases at a temperature of over 1100 degrees centigrade, and the retention time in the incinerator is over 2 seconds. So we get to a destruction rate efficiency of over 99.999%. This is not only because our technical data sheet says so, but it has been tested by independent facilities like the German TÜV. And it is confirmed that we actually reach that destruction rate efficiency. It does not really matter for the incineration itself. The type of gas that we incinerate is important to know what the steps after the incineration are. If we have material with high chlorine levels in the CFCs, then we need to add more chalk, more carbonate in our filter steps. So yes, the amount of material that we can incinerate per hour depends a little on what type of gas it is, what mix or what blend it is. But for the rest, no real technical changes we don't have to make. We just have to alter the input to the amount our filter units can handle.
Thanks for that, Buzz. No, so that's good news from your perspective. What's very clear is you need very high tech facilities to actually digest HFCs, which means that there is not, many countries that are in a position to actually have the facilities for their own and of their own. So that means that transboundary movements, as we progress with the implementation of Kigali, will increase to those countries that have these higher tech facilities, like South Africa, in this case, like Germany. Thanks, Bas, for that. From the audience, my question would be, what would you help? What would be beneficial for you from the ozone perspective, being confronted with transboundary movements of refrigerants end of life? Sir. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mr. Ibrahim Akan. I'm the PIP coordinator of Senegal. I would like, because time is up, just quickly to share with you 2 points regarding the challenge. I picked it in the statement of our director, who is here. It's also the Montreal focal points. Regarding the challenge and the issue of the transboundary movement, the first point to share is the illegal import or export of ODS and HFC through informal channel. The second point is a limited capacity for tracking cross-border flow and ensuring environmental sound management and recovery substance. And finally, I have 2 suggestions. It's a proposal. The first one is to organize a joint meeting between the ozone officer and the Basel officer. And the second suggestion is in the national level to have a coordination between the ozone officer and the Basel officer also to work closely. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you for that, sir. Yeah, and that's a great suggestion. We've heard it before. It sounds so simple, right? Put these 2 officials and focal points in one room so that they can understand each other's challenges. But that's a great plan to actually be more active in merging these 2 communities.
Thank you very much for the informative presentations and interesting panel. I think it's very important to clear up one important item. If I understood correctly, Madame Terakova, it will be shown as waste. So I don't know if it will have a different tariff code. And also, there might be some duplicity in the reporting or statistics in regards to the destruction. So those are some things that need to be very clear if we are seeing the connection between the Basel Convention and the reporting from Basel Convention and Montreal Protocol.
No, we didn't touch upon it that much this time, but question of definitions is certainly one of the barriers that we have to overcome. Not only because national definitions under Basel may actually differ, but also different definitions between the Basel process and the Montreal Protocol process. So let's list that as something that can really help us make the process more smoother to align these different definitions. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, Ellen Michel from GIZ and also the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance. And I heard that it was mentioned it would be nice and good to have a guideline for transboundary movement for national ozone officers. And I wanted to put to your attention that on the COPA website, we do have a guideline for transboundary movement of ODS waste available. So anybody who's interested, I'm happy to share the link. And please have a look. If there's any need for further clarifications, we're happy to provide that. And also we invite you to use the Climate and Ozone Protection Alliance for exchange and continuation of this dialogue. So that's an offer I wanted to share.
Excellent. Good news. Thank you. I saw one in the back, and then I turn to you. but we've noticed the GIZ resource for that. That's very useful. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Oh, that's quite loud. So my name is Yvonne Ewang. I'm actually from the BRS Secretariat, so former colleague of Tatiana, and I guess one of the troublemakers, but hopefully bringing people together. And thank you for the very interesting side event. And certainly from the Secretariat side, we look very much towards bringing both sets of contacts together, the Montreal side and Basel side. Just in terms of the contacts and as a solution, should anybody face a challenge, we do have on our website a database that is regularly updated on a daily basis with information from parties. As Tatiana mentioned, we depend on parties sending us their updates. So that's where there may be some challenges. But should you face any difficulties, then please feel free to reach out to the Secretariat. We do that on a regular basis because we have channels, for example, through Foreign Affairs with parties to check if there are updates. Sometimes it's a question of something pending between receiving it and checking what actually needs to be updated. So it's always a good idea to reach out to the Secretariat and say, are you aware of any updates? We're having some challenges, and we're always happy to help and follow up on that. So a resource for you if needed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that. One question and suggestion, and then we turn to Gabe and Uznur for some final reflections and perhaps next steps in the way forward. Please.
Thanks. I'm Bettina Schreck. I'm an independent consultant and a member of the MC Talk. Would you be able to give us some indication of the cost of all of the bureaucracy as part of the destruction cost, just order of magnitude or percentage?
The cost of destruction far outweighs the cost of doing the transboundary movement, not in terms of color of hair. However, the frustrations that come with doing the process is a challenge. I think on a financial side, there's the loss of material, which as a carbon developer, of course, becomes a loss to us as well as a loss to the planet. And then from the financial piece, I'll just say that the financial guarantee is not something that we've talked about a lot, but even figuring out this whole process, getting a bank in a country where you're seeing the destruction happen is usually what's required, and not everybody has the ability to do that work, and that can be a real financial barrier that people face.
And then I have a comment regarding customs and perhaps a question to Tatiana and the colleague from the Basel Convention. I'm aware of the fact that through the HPMPs, there has been a big effort to train customs officers on the import of controlled substances to make sure that they cover all potential points of entry. Could those trained customs officers or could that training program include aspects of Basel to also handle the export part of things? Because as far as I'm aware, typically in each country, there's one Basel focal point, but then we train, I would say, hundreds of customs officers in importing. Maybe the resource is there and we are not utilizing it.
No, we can go into that after the side event. I know, first of all, an absolutely useful point, because we're talking about Basel focal points in Montreal, protocol focal points, but those in harbors, those in customs are a critical element in that chain. So, and I know from certain regional workshops under Basel also that customs have been very much involved, but it could perhaps be in a more structured way to bring these on board as well. That's a good point. Before turning to Gabe and Uznur for some final reflections, I want to extend a special thanks to the panelists for taking the time. I know it's a busy week, so we really appreciate and value your contribution. Both the panelists that are here and the panelist that is remotely with us. Buzz, thanks for your time as well. Much appreciated. And with those thanks, I quickly turn to Gabe and Uznur for some final reflections before we break up.
So I just want to echo my thanks as well to the panelists, and Bas for joining us, also from Germany, and to all of you for coming. It's really important to have this conversation. And I will just say that I think as we focus on LRM, end of life is important. So solving this will be essential. And it's my sincere hope that we can figure this out. We can work together. We can move this from a side event conversation to a plenary level or a secretariat level conversation, and then back down to all of the countries. There's been some really good conversations here, I think, and really good suggestions. We will take some of these. We will write this up. We have information for all of you who are here, and we look forward to sharing some of that out, including some of these great suggestions about very concrete next steps. I think that's the other thing here is it's hard and it's challenging and it's complicated, but it's very doable. We don't need a technological solution. We don't need to figure something out that hasn't been figured out. We just need to really communicate. And I think that theme here of talking to each other at high levels, talking within each country, and talking regionally, all of those seem like it will help a long way to making this an easier process. So we look forward to sharing the information here and being part of those conversations and helping out in any way that we can.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm echoing the thanks, but I'm not going to repeat them. What I would like to say is I'm really glad that this forum we try to create is working. It's productive to share experiences, resources, and make some suggestions. On the topic of resources, what I'm hearing is there are already existing resources created by the Basel Secretary as well as COPA and others that I'm not aware of. But maybe a role Carbon Containment Lab could play is to consolidate these resources and make them more available, visible to whomever needs it. And if there are more resources needed on the topics not covered by these guidelines and documents, we can work with ozone officers as well as Basel focal points as a Carbon Containment Lab to create those materials, easy, simple, that could be helpful for you. As well as on the solutions, I would be looking forward to continue the conversation so that we can turn this side event into some actionable, something that will help us to make Kigali happen. Yeah, thank you very much.